Hello everybody, and welcome to a video where I'm recapping my experience at MTG Spotlight Series Toronto, where I got to sling some spells in the snow playing high-stakes Lorwyn Eclipsed Sealed and Draft. I'm going to be telling you about the decks I played, even letting you rebuild the sealed pool that I had if you'd like, showing you all the decks, talking about some highlights from the event, showing off some cool photos and videos. It's going to be a great time. I had a blast at the event, and I can't wait to tell you all about it. First things first, what was it like when I arrived in the frozen wastelands of Toronto?
We made it to Toronto. It's looking lovely out here, and we're excited to win some Magic. You know you're in Toronto when you see the CN Tower just off in the distance.
Now, Toronto's a great city and a ton of fun, but I was focused on doing well in the tournament, so that meant getting good food and good sleep and being really prepared for the tournament ahead. Of course, I had to try some poutine because that is a Toronto specialty or Canada specialty, so I wanted to have some local specialties while I was there. But after eating a delicious poutine, I then went back to my room, got plenty of sleep, and was geared up for the tournament ahead. Of course, it was very cold. I was told it was the 3 coldest days of the year while I was there, so waking up in the morning was a little bit chilly, to say the least, as I got ready for the tournament.
Getting ready to walk into the convention. It's a crisp -5 degrees here in Toronto, and we're excited for a big day of Magic.
Now, if you have never played in a high-stakes limited tournament, the way they typically work is day 1 is high-stakes sealed, and day 2 is draft, where you play 2 drafts on day 2, simply because the logistics of doing draft for the entire tournament, with around 1,800 players for this tournament, a huge tournament, great turnout, it would be really tricky to do drafts for all of those players. And so day 2, it's a smaller pool. You have to go 6 and 2 or better on day 1 in order to make it to day 2, which is no easy feat. There are tons of great players in the field, and everyone's trying to do their best, so going 6 and 2 is no gimme, but I felt prepared. I was really excited for this, and in my sealed pool, I opened it up and I was ready to battle. So 6 and 2 or better is the goal to make it to day 2 draft. I have my sealed pool already made. I put it into this cool handy dandy website, and I'm going to put a link to this in the description down below so you can look at the sealed pool yourself and maybe even try to do a build yourself before seeing how I built it when I was doing it. So you can find that link in the description, but basically here are kind of the highlights of my pool. We can sort by rarity. Perfect. The rares in my pool are some of the most narrow rares in the entire set. I have Champion of the Klakan, which only really goes into green-white Kithkin. I have the Champion of the Shoal, which only really goes into blue-white Merfolk. I have Grub, Storied Matriarch, which only really shines in a Goblin's Shell. And then I got a little bit lucky and I got Tristan, Tristan's Command, and High Perfect Moorcant. So those were my 3 kind of premier rares that I was working with. They all fit into elves. I even had an Overgrown Tomb that helps me draft elves or build elves. And so those were kind of like, okay, well, if I want to play my most powerful cards, I'm going to have to probably play it black-green. Tristan's Command is somewhat splashable as a top-end card. You could play that into like a red-green deck, but that was kind of where my mind was at initially. The thing about my colors, when I was looking at them, weren't really a ton of great white cards. There weren't really a ton of good blue cards to go with my Champion of the Klakan or with my Champions of the Shoal, even though I do have a couple of Eclipsed Marrows, which are really, really strong cards and would make me want to play Merfolk conventionally. The thing is, my black and green cards aren't particularly great either. I have this Assert Perfection. I wish I could bring in more cards all at once, but just bringing in all of my green cards into the pool and all of my black cards into the pool, and then like my black green cards, I am missing a little bit on some of the power level that I would typically want from a sealed pool because, okay, here we go. I just get a couple of lands, which is always really helpful in sealed. So, and then I can sort this by mana value. Okay. So something like this is kind of like what I have for my black and green cards. Obviously, I'd have to add lands, but cutting things like Tend the Sprigs, which isn't a very good card, cutting a thing like the Moonglove Extractor, which I didn't end up cutting that. The Grub is not a card I can really play in this. I didn't really want Gut Splitter Gang because I didn't have any synergies with that. I ended up not really caring about the Blighted Blackthorn because I have so many 5-drops that I think could be useful for this deck. Wildvine Pummeler, not super useful. So just as I'm cutting down these cards, you kind of see one of my weaknesses. I don't really have good 2-drops in this build. I have like a few 2-drops. Dundul and Weaver is much better as a late game play, but I really only have like 3 cards to play on turn 2, and that's including an Eclipsed Kithkin. So 2-drops, a real weakness of this pool. I also have kind of infinite 5-drops, but there's not a ton of value in this deck. But I thought, okay, I can play this build. I have a couple 2-drops. Eclipsed Kithkin plus an Overgrown Tomb plus Evolving Wilds means that I can actually get up to a reasonable number of forests, and then I can use kind of that to like have 10 green sources, 7 black sources, something like that, and that'll help me cast Eclipsed Kithkin. I do have a couple Kithkin like the Dundulan Weaver, and I have the Mist Meadow Council, and so this was kind of like my base level build. I think it was this cards plus Gangly Stompling got in there. There he is. I think this was my game 1 build, and the thing about this build is it's very solid. If you draw Tristan's Command, you basically win. I have a lot of elves for High Perfect Morcant, even though it's sealed and it's kind of hard to get the elf count going. I think I added like, for the record, I added like more forests than swamps. I think I had like 9 forests, 7 swamps in this build because I did have this Eclipse Kithkin I wanted to play, the triple green for Glister Band, something like that. So yeah, I ended up playing 8 forests, 7 swamps. I think this is the exact build that I had for my game 1s of my deck. And you'll notice the weaknesses were 2-drops. And I was kind of thinking, okay, the draft format can be a little bit quick. I'm worried about playing against aggro, so I don't want to go risky and try to get too greedy on playing like a 3rd color, even though I am playing some clunkers here. The last few cards that I added to my deck, for those who were curious, were these this Moonglove Extractor, the Glister Bairn, the Gilt Leaf Embrace. Those were the 3 cards that were kind of like, I wish I didn't have to play these, similar with Stoic Grove Guide. I didn't really want to have to play these, but I was like, okay, well, Moonglove Extractor kind of attacks. Gilt Leaf Embrace is kind of a combo with that, and then and then Glister Baron is also a card that kind of can help Moonglove Extractor attack. So they were kind of like a little synergy package, but I wasn't super happy with them. My red cards actually have some really neat cards in them. I have 2 Kolrath Zealots, which is quite nice and sealed. The value is really nice. Feed the Flames can be decent removal. Tweeze can be nice removal. The Gristle Gluttons can be okay. Prodigy can be nice. Cinder Strike can be nice. And what I ended up doing was between rounds, I had plenty of time. I was like, okay, what if I wanted to get a more value-oriented build? Because I was kind of feeling the lack of 2-for-1s in my deck. Like Mist Meadow Council is a 2-for-1. The Tristan's Command is obviously fantastic, but what can I do to get more value into my deck for these grindy matchups if I'm not playing against a fast deck where I really want to try to be consistent with my mana? And spoiler alert, this format just kind of has a lot of cards, like a lot of grindy elements to it when you're playing sealed. So I ended up siding into this package pretty much every single round of the 2 Kolrath Zealots, Feed the Flames, Tweeze, Explosive Prodigy, Feardock Core. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 cards, and then I would side in 2 mountains actually. So I think it was 8 cards total that I was siding in for like every single matchup. A couple of times I would side in Cinder Strike, like against a Merfolk opponent where I really wanted extra kill spells. I sided in the Cinder Strike, but normally that's not the best splash card. But I was siding in like these 6 cards plus I think 3 mountains was what I ended up doing. I think I tried 2 mountains and it didn't feel like enough sources. And I would cut my Glister Bairn, Stoic Grove Guide, Gilt Leaf Embrace, that card. So I would then be able to bring in a lot more removal spells, a lot more interaction, and then some more value as well. Feardock Core was also helping, and I think I was actually cutting a land because I then had Feardock Core plus Great Forest Druid, which was pretty helpful, and then I was cutting my heavier green cards like Eclipsed Kithkin as well, which I didn't think I could really support, and I think I was often cutting like Gangly Stompling, like I think this is ended up being kind of the build that I was going for a lot of the time. I think I was cutting like 1 more card in many cases. Maybe Mischievous Sneakling was going out a lot of the time as well. So I was like, okay, if the 2-drops don't really matter as much, I'll just cut down these cards, add in a bunch of these red cards, and that ended up being really, really effective. And I was able to do quite well in my rounds. Now, I'm not going to talk about every little detail of each round I played because it's really hard to follow without actually seeing the games, but I've got this little handy-dandy life total pad that I was using to keep track of every card my opponents played against me, or as many as I could try to write down during the rounds, because I find that in best of 3 matches, especially these high-stakes ones, it's really nice to know if you're going into Game 3 what cards your opponent has access to. And if you play long Game 1 and long Game 2, then you oftentimes will see most of your opponent's cards, and going into Game 3, you might know 18 of their 23 spells, and that gives you a lot of like knowledge that you can just use to your advantage. So I like to do it. You don't have to do it. I don't think any of my opponents were doing it, but I think that did give me an edge in some of the Game 3s and just help me stay focused, help me stay present, helps me stay paying attention during the games. So that's something I like to do. I'll just give you a quick synopsis of each of the rounds. Round 1, I played against the Goblins deck. They got me in Game 1, but I was able to battle back Games 2 and 3. I did a lot of Game 3s in the course of this tournament, and on day 1 especially, Game 3s were kind of where I was coming in really, really clutch. I think in day 1 I played Game 3 in every single round except for 2 of them, and it was really a good spot for me to be in many of these cases. Round 2, after beating the Goblins deck, I played against a game 1 green-white Kithkin deck, and then game 2 and 3 they sided into blue-white Merfolk, and that's kind of when I realized I wanted a little bit more oomph for these grindy matchups, because they just played some card draw spells in the Merfolk deck, and I was like, okay, I need some more value in my deck. That's when I developed the red sideboard plan. Also, just having access to more kill spells as a sideboard package is really good against some decks that have cards you really need to kill. So getting those extra red removal spells in there was also really good. I wasn't able to do it that round, but between those rounds, I was able to develop the red sideboard plan, which I then got to use in round 3, where I played against a fan. They were playing red-blue elementals. I was able to emerge victorious in game 1. They made a slight misplay. I think they got nervous playing against me, but that's how it goes. You got to play your hardest, and sometimes you get a little bit lucky that way. But I won game 1, won game 2 with the red sideboard plan, and I was really, really happy because I think the red sideboard plan was a big factor in why I won that game 2. Round 4, I played against a kind of Mardu deck that had a bunch of really strong cards. Game 1, they crushed me with rares. They went like 2-drop rare, 3-drop rare, and I stumbled on mana. They crushed me. Games 2 and 3, I was able to battle back once again with the sideboard plan. Getting that extra value was absolutely huge from my cards. So always be looking for these sideboard plans. You have all this time between rounds. Well, not really me. I was playing game 3s, going deep in the round every time. But when you have extra time, try to develop these plans, or think about your pool and maybe how you can make it better, because it definitely came in clutch, and I don't think I would have done as well if I hadn't developed this red sideboard plan, which ended up being absolutely fantastic for me. The next round I played against an Elves mirror match. Once again, I lost game 1 and then was able to battle back and get that extra value when my red sideboard plan wins game 2 and 3. The next round was another really close round. I won game 1, lost game 2. Then we were kind of in a scramble for time at the end, and I was able to top deck a critical Shimmer Creep to get my opponent down to 1 life so that I could swing for the win in a game that I was almost certainly going to lose if I didn't have that top deck. So I felt like I escaped in that round by making a crucial top deck. I had felt like I'd maybe played a little bit loose because we were trying to play fast, and that had cost me a little bit, but then the top deck really helped save me. And that difference between starting off the tournament 5-1 and starting off 4-2 really just changes everything, because when you're 5-1, you feel, okay, I've already won 5 rounds. I've only lost once. And with my new sideboard plan, I haven't really lost. I feel like I can make it to day 2. And that's exactly what happened in the next round. I played against a blue-white Merfolk deck, one of the most aggressive decks I faced all day, but I still wanted to side in my red sideboard plan because it had been working for me so well. I was able to win game 2, win game 1, lost game 2, and then I was able to clutch it out in game 3. And that was really, really a big moment for me, going 6-1, getting to that day 2 guaranteed. I still wanted to win. That's another key thing. When you're playing these tournaments, if you make it to day 2 or you hit the threshold you want, don't lose focus. You still have to keep playing hard, keep your focus, because a lot of people go like, okay, I got to 6 wins. Now I can stop focusing. That's not where you want to be. You want to stay focused the entire time. I stayed locked in, but unfortunately it was not meant to be in the last round. I think I missed a couple land drops, got stuck on like 4 lands or 3 lands or something like that in game 1. And then game 2 was the first time where my sideboard plan kind of backfired from a mana perspective. I had a Tristan's Command in my hand, but I didn't have black mana to cast it, and it wasn't going to be super relevant. I had like 5 mana in play. I had a Kolrath Zealot, so I could have like cycled it to get my black mana, but I wanted to like hit that land drop, play the Kolrath Zealot, get the value naturally, and then my opponent played a Kin Binding I didn't know about. Having an access to an enchantment destruction spell would have been really handy. By the time I got the black mana, they had a counter spell available, and so I lost, ending up 6-2, still a fantastic record, and I was really, really thrilled. I was also thrilled to meet tons of fans over the course of the day. I met so many people that came up to me and said, oh, I'm a huge fan of your stuff, and or they'd be like, oh, you were the first person I watched when I was learning how to draft, and it was just such a fantastic experience getting to meet so many people over the course of that day. I got to meet some people from the NicolaiBolas Discord server, which is a really cool experience too, because I've interacted with them for such a long time in the Discord server, so getting to put faces to the names was really, really fun. It was kind of funny. They'd introduce themselves by like, hey, I'm this, and they'd be like their username from the Discord server, and then like I wouldn't actually know their real name until they would like formally introduce themselves, which was kind of funny. But it was a really great time. I got to meet so many people, and I was really thrilled going in to be able to compete in day 2 of the competition. So I went and had a bit of a celebratory dinner, and then I was gearing up for the next day of competition.
Successful day 1. Managed to get that 6-2 record. Gonna get some dinner now, but whew, boy, it's cold out here, but let's go.
So I made it to day 2. I was ready for some high stakes drafting, which is a ton of fun because it's a timed draft, which means that you only have a certain amount of time to make your picks. You can't look at your packs, the cards you've already selected, except between packs. So your memory comes into play, which is something I'm really good at. And I felt really well prepared for the format. And I really thought that I was going to do quite well. I was really excited to do these drafts. And I ended up drafting this deck for my first deck. So I ended up first picking a Champions of the Shoal and then trying to draft a little bit of Merfolk, but I was really willing to abandon my first pick. That was kind of a strategy I had. So I first picked Champion of the Shoal, and I did end up in a blue-white deck, but I had second picked Thoughtweft Lieutenant. I was willing to maybe go into green if that was what was flowing, but I ended up getting with Champion of the Shoal. I was kind of like debating what my second color should be, and then I got Kin Binding in pack 2, and that was like, okay, I'm going to play blue-white. I did end up getting a couple of other cool elements. I got an Abigail, Eloquent First Year. It was a pretty interesting pick because it was between Abigail and the Merfolk Lord, but 2-drop, but I didn't really have like a ton of Merfolk in this deck at the time because I just hadn't seen the Merfolk. I just had kind of barely enough to support my Champion of the Shoal. I also had Champion of the Klakan, which I had like barely enough Kithkin to support this. I had like 8 Kithkins and 8 Merfolk, which is enough for these cards, but not maybe as many as you would want in like a dedicated deck. And it makes the cards a little bit weaker when Champions of the Klakan isn't buffing up all your guides. But my deck ended up being like pretty reasonable. I thought Kin Binding can just kind of win you games when you play it in any reasonable curve. Abigail can help you do some serious work. Champions of the Shoal, really, really strong card. And I felt like I had enough interaction with a couple of keep outs and a liminal hold to kind of get the job done. And going into this, the match, I was feeling pretty confident. The last kind of card that I was adding was this Aquatex Defenses. I wasn't sure if I wanted this. I wasn't sure if I wanted to go down to 16 lands, but this was the deck that I ended up with. I think Stalactite Dagger and Gallant Foul Knight were also like potential options I considered. Wild Unraveling was another one I considered. I often sideboarded this card in, but going into the rounds, I was feeling pretty good about my deck because Kin Binding is a really good rare for any game that goes long, and I had some other power level with Champions, Abigail, decent curve, a little bit of interaction. So this is kind of the sort of deck where it's a little scrappier, but you are playing against really good players, so you're less likely to get good cards late, and I was feeling pretty good going into the games. So I have a deck I'm pretty happy with going into round 1, and I get paired against the person I was passing to, which is probably the person in the pod I was least hoping to play against, because when chatting with them, they told me that they had come in 9th place in a Pro Tour the previous year, and that was Edgar Magalhaes, who's someone that I'm only name dropping because they're currently ranked almost 100th in the world. So really, really well in the live rankings on MTG Elo Project. They're a really strong player, one of the best players I've ever faced in one of these tournaments, and we had a legendary match. Game 1, I was able to get there with my Kin Binding. Game 2, he was able to kind of crush me by having just like a nice curve out of creatures. It did take a little bit longer for him to beat me game 2. And game 3, we started with maybe 20-25 minutes left in the round, which you start off with 50 minutes, so pretty reasonable to expect that we'd finish the match. And we played one of the grindiest, most intense battles that I've ever played in this format, and just in any format, quite frankly, because it was a high stakes tournament. As you can see, keeping notes of what my opponent was playing came in really clutch because we played such a long game 2. We played a game 1. I knew a lot of the cards available in his deck, and that meant that I was able to make better plays, and I think that that was really important in this sort of long grindy match. I was gaining a bunch of life with my Abigail. He then made like a bunch of tokens with Morkant's Eyes. It was like 12 elves or something at that point in the game, but because it was such a stalematey board and I had so many creatures in play, he wasn't able to like punch through and finish the job, and we ended up playing this really long game where eventually we went to turns and we were going to tie. And that is when Edgar very gallantly decided to concede to me so that one of us could get the win. And I had no expectation he would concede. I didn't ask him to concede, but he was like, okay, neither of us can win the tournament if one of us loses. He didn't vocalize this out loud, but I'm just extrapolating. He's probably like, okay, only one of us has a chance to win the tournament if one of us wins. Obviously, tying is good for your place in the standings because you beat the people who didn't tie when you are coming in the standings at the end. But he decided to concede to me. I was really generous of him. He did have 4 cards left in his deck, so that might have been a factor. Like, if the game had kept going after turns, he was definitely going to deck, I think, before he was able to close the game. But he had been, like, aggressively milling himself with a Tristan Callous Cultivator, and so in my mind, it was like, oh, he was milling himself trying to win the game, and he wouldn't have done that if he'd, like, if we've been playing the game for a longer time, because he would have known decking was a thing. Whereas in this case, it was like, do everything you can to push damage. So that was kind of the way that I was thinking about it. And I was like, not going to, I was just thought we were going to tie. And then he conceded to me. So I was able to start day 2 with a victory. The next round I played against another Elves deck. And it's interesting because I was passing to Edgar. So I kind of knew some of the cards that he might be working with. And then I played against another Elves deck and I was like, oh, so it's kind of a similar matchup. So I sideboarded in a counter spell for my first round. I decided to sideboard, I think I sideboarded in 2 counter spells in my first round. I sideboarded in the 2 counter spells in this round as well. I think I lost game 1, was able to win game 2 when he stumbled and I got my kin binding. And then game 3, unfortunately, I had to mulligan to 5. He mulliganed to 6, but then he had like the greatest hand I've ever seen on the play with his 6-card hand against my 5-card hand, which just couldn't really function. Mulliganing to 5 is never something you want to have happen, but you have to get a little bit lucky in the key moments to do well in these tournaments. And I had just didn't have the fortune I needed in that moment. So I lost round 2. And then in the round 3 of the draft, I played against another blue-white deck, the mirror match of sorts. His was much more focused on the merfolk. He was able to defeat me in game 1 in a really close one. This was maybe the closest game I played other than the tie that I had actually battled to, where it came down to, okay, if he draws 1 land here, I'm going to be able to win the game. Where he had mulliganed, but he got to 5 lands and never drew another land. And there was like 2 turns in a row where if he had drawn a land, I might have been able to battle back, I kind of put him in a spot where if he didn't draw a land, I was going to be winning. He drew a creature, and he was able to emerge victorious as a result in game 1. It's like the classic, I drew 8 lands, he drew 5. If he draws 1 more land or I draw 1 fewer, I think I could win the game. It was just a really close battle. The next game, I was able to defeat him. And then in game 3, I had a really sketchy hand based on the previous round where I mulliganed and I had to mulligan down to 5. I was like, okay, I'm going to keep this kind of sketchy hand. I didn't have access to white mana, but I did have my kin binding and my Abigail. So you might be like, okay, 2 double white cards. But I was like, okay, I had like a path I could see in my head where I like had a blue 2-drop. I had a liminal hold. So if I draw up planes, I buy myself some time, find my second planes, play kin binding, can maybe win the game. And I was running some numbers on it, and I think it was a relatively defensible keep. But it was the classic where you keep a sketchy hand, don't draw the planes, it looks terrible, and you lose the round where you don't even get to really play a game 3. So I was 1-2 to start the day with a deck that I was pretty happy with the deck that I had drafted. I thought I did pretty well for my seat, and that's just how it goes sometimes where you're just like, okay, you're a little bit demoralized, but you have to battle back, do as well as you can for the next round. And I had technically not even won a round that day because I had got the concession in a game that would have been a tie, but I had the win. I guess that is technically a win, but you know what I mean. It was a kind of demoralizing start to the day for me where I was like, okay, this is a little bit tricky, but you got to battle back in these situations. And I did go into the second draft with a can-do attitude. Now, at this point, I could no longer win the tournament, but I still wanted to do as well as I possibly could, and I sat down for this next draft really excited to see what I could get. And huge shout out to Brian from the Discord server for getting this awesome picture of me gearing up for this big draft, because it's still super fun when they're calling out the time for your picks. You want to do as well as possible. You want a little bit of redemption after kind of a rough first draft, and that's exactly where I found myself, and I loved this draft. It was absolutely fantastic. Here is the deck that I ended up getting. It was a sweet, sweet Elves deck, which is maybe the best deck in the entire format, and nobody else was really drafting it. I think I started the draft off with something like, I actually don't even really necessarily remember my first pick as much. It was definitely an elf card. I think I started off with Moon Vigil Adherents, or maybe, I think I got Lewin a little bit later, but I started off with like Moon Vigil Adherents and then immediately got past Moorcant's Loyalist. And then I was just like trying to keep my options open because that was kind of my strategy, but Elves was like so open that I was getting Scarblade Scout left with 2 cards left in the pack. It was like basic Mountain and Scarblade Scout, like wheeling around the table. I got Marilyn in pack 3 with like pick 6 or pick 5 or something like that. It was super wide open. I had Lewin, I had Marilyn, I had 2 Moon Vigil Adherents, I had Moorcant's Loyalist, which I had second picked, which was great. I had another Abigail. This deck was absolutely stellar. It had so many elves, and I had like, where is it? Moorcant's Eyes. Yeah, there it is. Moorcant's Eyes. I don't know why I couldn't see it. It was literally right there. But this card's also fantastic in this deck. It was just really, really strong. The only weakness, really, was that I only had 2 kill spells. I had Bogslither's Embrace, and I had Assert Perfection. And there was a point in pack 2 where I could have taken another Assert Perfection, or maybe it was early pack 3, but I took another Moon Vigil Adherents because it's just so good in my deck. And I figured, okay, I can just like bulldoze my opponents and maybe don't need the removal as much. But the Assert Perfection, Bogslither's Embrace were kind of load-bearing removal spells, and I wish I'd been able to get a little bit more. But this deck was absolutely fantastic. I think it was just a really good deck, especially because in this scenario, everyone's a good drafter. They've made it to day 2 of the event, even though maybe their like day 2 hasn't gone the way they wanted it to go. They're still really good players, and getting a deck of this quality in this high-stakes environment was really, really good, and I was really happy to be in this position going into my next round. Okay, so I had a really sweet deck. I was battling for some redemption in this draft, and I came up against a blue-red Elementals deck in round 1, and game 1 was perfect. I had Lewin in play, I got Moon Vigil Adherents into play, I made a ton of Worm tokens, which kind of mitigated the fact that I was flooding out, and hit them with a giant Moon Vigil Adherents to win the game. Game 2, unfortunately, they got Tanafel Rhymespeaker going, and because I didn't really have any kill spells, and because I didn't have like a Lewin to mitigate the flood that I was kind of experiencing in that game, I wasn't able to get enough gas to cross the finish line, and he defeated me me in game 2. So it came down to game 3. I was really confident in my deck, and I had a great opening hand. I had a Lorwyn, I had both my removal spells, which was really nice because that was going to be how I answered another Tanafel Rhymespeaker if he played it, which he had some other good cards, but that was one that I was really worried about. And then I was like, well, Lorwyn can find me another spell, and I had 4 lands, but I was able to cast Marilyn if I drew it because I had my blue source or an Evolving Wilds or something like that. So I was feeling really good going into game 3, and unfortunately, I only drew 1 spell the entire game and lost. And like technically, I drew 2 spells because I put like a 2-drop back on top of my library when I played Lorwyn. I like milled like a couple of 2-drops and a couple lands, and so I put the 2-drop back on top because it was like a Scarblade Scout. So I was like, okay, I'll mill some more lands with this, make my Lorwyn a little better, also give me a backup creature to use with my Assert Perfection, so like I can like actually kill something with it if I need to while I wait to draw a better spell. And then the only other spell I drew the rest of the game was a Moon Vigil Adherence, which did buy me a lot of time as a 7/7, but unfortunately you can't win game 3s if you only draw 1 spell. So I was a little bit demoralized. Sweet deck loses, but I was able to keep a good mindset because I was thinking like, okay, you can stay positive, you can do well in the next rounds, just stay focused, and this is going to happen some percentage of the time. I got a little bit lucky in game 3s on day 1 sometimes, day 2 sometimes it's not going to go as well, and I was just feeling like you have to be like have perspective and be like, okay, a lot of things have to go right for you to do well in a tournament. Luck is one of those things. You can focus on your mindset. You can't always change your luck. You just have to do your best and always focus on ways you can improve, because even when you get a little bit unlucky, you can still focus on making sure you get every single edge possible. So at this point, I actually texted my like dad in the group chat or something like, man, I can't seem to buy a win today, because at this point I had like only won 1 round, and that was like technically a tie, and I felt like my decks were pretty solid and just game 3s weren't going my way. And then of course the next round I got a buy, so I did like buy a win, which was kind of funny. That made me laugh and chuckle a little bit. I didn't really want to buy because I wanted to play with my sweet deck, but that's how it goes. I used the opportunity to recharge and focus up for the all-important final round so I could actually get a win to my belt, one where my opponent didn't concede, one where my opponent showed up, so I would have a great way to finish the tournament off. And I played up against a really nice opponent who said they'd been watching my channel since I had only a couple hundred subscribers. So huge shout out to Brandon. It was really fun to play you and meet you. And we played a really fun match, and the games were just like really interesting. So game 1, my opponent, I was like, okay, my deck is doing this kind of a thing. I'm doing pretty well. And then he played Erdu, like Carrier of Dawn or whatever that card's called. And I was like, well, my deck has basically no removal spells. I'd already milled one of my removal spells. He has this giant lifelink flyer. There's basically no chance I can win unless I draw my kill spell, which I then drew my 4/2 flash reach creature, Dawn's Light Archer, and combined with an Abigail, I was able to double block the Erdu to take it off the board. He still had another flyer though, and I didn't have removal spells, of course, but I was at like 10 life, played a Lorwyn, milled over Moon Vigil Adherence, and had the choice of, okay, if I take this Moon Vigil Adherence, I can technically win this game if he draws nothing for the rest of the game, because I was at like 10 and he was going to hit me with a 2-powered flyer. So like he would hit me down to 8, I would draw my Moon Vigil Adherence and play it. He would hit me down to 6, I would get to like it was something like I would draw my Moon Vigil Adherence when I was 8 life. When I was at 6 life, I would get to play it. When I was at 4 life, I would get to attack once. And when I was at 2 life, I would get to attack a second time. And so if he had nothing, I was going to absolutely clobber him with this giant Moon Vigil Adherence, which was like going to be an 18/18, because Lorwyn was making like 10 worms a pop at that point whenever I activated it. So it was like one of those things where it was like, okay, if my opponent has nothing, I can actually win this game, the mathematical race, because they were at like 30 something life, because they've been gaining all this life from their Erdu, and their flyer had lifelink as their flyer didn't have lifelink anymore, but Erdu had gained them some life. So I ended up in this spot where I made like a really mathematical decision. Okay, if my opponent draws nothing, I can win this game. And then they drew nothing, and I won the game at 4 life when they realized that they weren't going to be able to finish me off before I was going to win the game. So it was a really close battle. And then game 2, I got to do Marilyn things. I played Marilyn on like turn 5, milled, hit my opponent's like keep out, killed the enchantment that had been keeping my creature back. Next turn I played another elf, hit another spell from them, and my opponent scooped it up. So I ended up the tournament with a win. It was a really satisfying win because my deck really felt like it was humming along. Going 2-1 in the last draft of the tournament felt amazing. It was a great way for that tournament to end. And I felt really, really proud of the whole thing. Now, my final place in the standings, drum roll please, was 135th place, which out of 1,800 is pretty dang good. It was a 40-way tie for 110th with players that were 9 and 5. It came down to tiebreakers. My tiebreakers weren't quite good enough to finish in the top 128, where I would have gotten a foil promo card for coming in the top 128. But 135th out of 1,800, tied for 110th, is pretty good finish, and I'm quite proud of how I played, and I wish I'd been able to get another win on day 2, but obviously sometimes luck just isn't on your side in game 3 scenarios. Sometimes it is on your side, like when I top decked the Dawn's Light Archer to double block my opponent's Erdu in the final round. But you just have to do your absolute best, focus on the positives, focus on playing your best, and just kind of let the cards fall as they may. So 135th place, pretty nice finish for myself, and I was pretty happy with how everything had gone down. It was a really fun tournament. I did get to spend the last day of my time in Toronto doing a little bit of sightseeing.
doing a little sightseeing in Toronto, of course, and then I just look up and boom is the CN Tower, which is like kind of like the Space Needle but Toronto version.
Going up to the top of the CN Tower before heading out from the city.
Smoke rises on the fires of industry above Toronto. So I showed you the fires of industry. This is the frozen wasteland.
It was a ton of fun. I really enjoyed it, and I can't wait to play more high-stakes events for Magic the Gathering going forward. Hopefully those limited ones keep on coming, because I think this one was a huge success, and hopefully that success propels them to make more events like this in the future. I hope to meet more of you at these sorts of events, because I always like to say it, whenever I'm at these sorts of events, meeting people that have watched my stuff is one of the best parts. It's a ton of fun, and I always love it when people come up to me and say, "Oh, I've been watching your videos. I'm a fan. It's great to like meet you in person." And getting to sign some stuff was also kind of surreal, because signing autographs is not something I ever thought I would be doing as a human being. So that meant a lot to me whenever someone asked me if I could sign their playmat or their card or something like that. That was really, really a cool experience. So thank you all for letting me have that experience, and it was really, really fun. That's going to do it for this video, though. I hope you enjoyed the recap. If you made it to the end of the video, leave hashtag Toronto success in the comment section down below, because I think the Spotlight Series in Toronto was a big success. I'm so glad I went. I'm so glad I got to meet so many of you. I'm so glad I got to make it to day 2, do draft some fun decks on day 2, and I'm really, really happy with how the whole thing went. That's going to do it for this one, though. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll talk to you next time.